Today, for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from the book of Daniella, Uncultured, the first book of Daniella. This is the chapter called Babylon the Whore. This part is my cute first little teenage love story. My adolescence was full of vivid dreams, of towers falling, 9/11 has just happened, of escaping my life, and sometimes in dreams that felt as though my rapidly changing body was betraying my mind, of boys. Sex had surrounded my life and overwhelmed my world since I was born, but it had only ever meant bad news to me. I used to spend hours wondering if I could make myself a lesbian so I would never have to deal with men ever again. But while bisexual activity was technically allowed for women in the family because it was enjoyable for the men, any suspicion of being exclusively gay could be big trouble. Still, I was surprised when suddenly, in my teenage years, I began to dream about tall, dark, and handsome boys. Like so many other unwanted encounters, I woke from those dreams feeling gross and unsettled, like something was terribly wrong. I tried to ignore what was happening in my body, but it was getting harder. Shortly after we moved to San Diego, I experienced my first normal kiss. Normal meaning with someone my own age, not forced or coerced through power or threats. But I still didn't like it. It was wet and creepy and gross. Not surprisingly, 14-year-old boys also kissing for the first time aren't terribly impressive. And something about the boy's desire, even at that age, felt threatening, like something about it erased me. David appeared at our commune a few months later, and he was very off limits. He was one of Uncle Byron and Auntie Meekness's 9 children, part of a set of twins who, at 18, were both backsliders from the children of God. It had been easy for the twins to leave the family because they'd already been living in the States with systemite grandparents less than an hour away. It struck me that this must be the reason Grandpa and Mama Maria had always hated it when their followers lived in the US. It was too easy to have access to the outside world, too easy to escape, to just walk away. The idea that you could leave the way David did secretly excited me, but the excitement didn't go very far. Unlike him, all my grandparents were in the family. My family was the family. I had nobody on the outside. David's blonde hair was long, past his shoulders, shaved on both sides to create a mohawk effect when he pulled it back. He dressed in baggy clothes, worked at Subway, a sandwich shop, not an underground train station, I learned to my surprise, and spent his free time reading fantasy novels. I thought he was the coolest person I had ever met. In the family, no one could ever look too cool. Just like in the army, you can't be too fattish. But the rules didn't really apply to David since he technically wasn't in the family anymore. Plus, things had changed a lot in the last few years, with far less supervision from higher ups than before. America, as I learned more every day, had a way of changing everything. Even though David had decided he was done conforming to our rules, Auntie Meekness still wanted to give her son a place to stay, and enough of us voted yes. So that was that. A backslider came to live with us. Nobody yelled at him to cut his hair or wear clothes that fit him better. He kept his job, his system music, and was allowed to keep his books, as long as he made sure he didn't infect the other young people in the home. He shared a room with his younger brothers, but spent most of the rest of his time out or in the garage. David tried to look cool and scowled to make everyone keep their distance, but I learned he was quiet, shy, and sweet. He'd let me, a goofy looking kid struggling to get her frizzy hair under control and desperate to be prettier, hang out with him. I would sit on the stoop of the garage and riddle him with questions about his job, about the world, and about his books. When he realized I loved to read, he began loaning me his fantasy novels after he finished them. I'd sit on my top bunk, a book of Moe letters open in my lap, and my newest prize from whatever series he was working through hidden behind it. I lapped up one after the other, never caring what topic it was, just how long it would last. Sometimes he'd give me or one of his younger brothers a couple dollars from the tips he'd gotten that day, because he knew what a big deal tiny amounts of money were to kids like us. He became my friend and began to be my escape, my benefactor, and the boy with the most beautiful hands in the world. I fell madly in love with him. For many weeks, we just talked. I would sneak out of my bed after everyone was asleep and sit on the steps of the garage, which in my mind were still part of the house because they were connected to it. Some part of me believed that by staying on the steps, I wasn't crossing a line by being in his space, not breaking the rules by being out there with him, even though we both knew there'd be hell to pay if we were caught. As I got to know him in those weeks, I learned even though he seemed to have it all together, he was still as confused and lost as I was. And I wondered if all of us children of the children of God were destined for that future, regardless of whether we stayed or left. One day at about 2 in the morning, I tiptoed gingerly into the garage, and without even thinking about it too much, I scribbled out a note and handed it to David. Do you want to have sex with me? We both looked surprised when his head snapped back up. Then he looked away, embarrassed. I don't remember the invitation being a conscious decision. It's just what we did in the family. That's how we showed God's love. I knew I liked him, that I wanted to be close to him, and sex is what we did when we had those feelings, and often when we didn't. I didn't know if it was my love or God's love speaking. I just knew it seemed like the logical next step. He sat a bit stunned and didn't respond for what seemed like hours. As we sat there in silence, I wondered what took him so long to say yes. Was he worried about me getting in trouble for sleeping with a systemite? Did he think I wasn't pretty enough? People in the family didn't say no to sex. But then again, he was no longer in the family. Did being a backslider mean you could say no to sex? Finally, he said, okay. I could tell he was nervous, which surprised me. Boys in the family were usually so confident about sex, so entitled about taking whatever they wanted. It never occurred to me that it might have been David's first time. Other boys usually lost their virginity far younger than 18. We grabbed a blanket from the garage and headed out to a spot I loved, under a pine tree on the very edge of our property, overlooking a hill that looked down on the sparkling city lights of La Jolla. We spread the blanket out and sat next to each other for a long time, neither of us sure where to start or what to do. I lay my head on his shoulder, touching him for the first time, bridging the physical gap. I started to panic. Thoughts raced through my mind as my heart pounded in my chest. I thought about making a run for it. What have I done? I thought, I don't like sex. I don't want sex. But I loved David. I wanted him close to me. I wanted him to be part of me. I wanted to hold on to him forever, unlike everything else in my world that was so transient. I didn't know what else there was to do. On that hillside, on that night, I decided this would be my first time. Nothing that happened before existed anymore. There was only this boy, this blanket, these stars, this kiss, and these memories. All that other stuff couldn't ever count. Not the men who'd forced me, the teenage boys who'd fondled me against my will, or the misguided misadventures I'd attempted with other boys in the past because it was what I was expected to do. This time was different. It was my decision, led by me with no pressure, no expectations. I was going to claim this as a good moment in my life. This was going to be the night I found my virginity and reclaimed it. The virginity that had never been valued, had never been considered sacred, and had never, ever been protected. When I finally turned and kissed him, he kissed me back, gently and slowly, his hands in my hair and his eyes locked to mine. I felt a real connection. I felt the power of my decision spreading throughout my body. And I stayed in my body, fully present, not floating away like I had trained myself to do so many years ago. This was what it was supposed to feel like. This was what love felt like. Afterward, looking at those city lights, I felt warm and happy. It really had felt like the first time, like I had entered a whole new world I wanted to keep exploring with him. I decided I loved America, and I knew I always would. It was a place where I could stay forever, where I could be happy, where I could belong, where I could maybe one day be free. I was safe here, in this country, in this commune, in David's arms, and I never ever wanted to leave. We stayed there for a long time, watching the sun crest the hill with all its yellow and pink glory. I remember thinking that I'd never been truly happy before, not like this. I'd only ever been trying to survive. I'd made up my mind then and there that I'd never let the feelings go, that I'd never let anyone take these gilded memories from me. Then the moment was over, and we had to rush back to the house and get ready for morning devotions. That was when my parents announced, as we'd always known, that our time in San Diego was never meant to be permanent, and they'd found a new place for us out in the field. It was time to be missionaries again, in Mexico.